Hello everybody, this is Tazilon, and I'm in my garage here at the Lighthouse to bring you a Scout review on the other U.S. Tier 6 Scout, the T21. The T37 gets all the fame and glory, but if you're moving up the heavy line towards the T57 Heavy, or you just like collecting Scouts, when you get the T21 you're going to be pleasantly surprised at how adept it is in the field of battle. It's somewhat overlooked, often underrated, but it is an above average scout and it performs very well. Throughout its history, it has always produced a good win rate overall for a scout. And you may be looking at it right now thinking, wow, that looks suspiciously like a T20 medium, and there's a good reason for that. We'll discuss that here in a little bit. What we're going to do in this review is look at its real world history. Was it ever produced? Did it ever see battle? How did it go in its design and development? And then we'll take a look at its in-game stats, how it compares to its sister Tier 6 Scouts in terms of mobility, vision control, survivability, and firepower. Look at the ammo load you should take. Discuss what order you should upgrade your modules when you first buy the tank. Look at the equipment you should carry and the consumables you should have on board. Discuss the initial 4 crew skills you're going to want on the tank. And then finally look at its play style, things you can do and things you have to be wary of doing when you have it out in battle. And then finally we'll take it out for a spin and show it off in a public battle. So here we go, the history of the T21. Back in August of 1942, the United States Army was looking to replace the M3, M5 series light tanks that they were currently employing. They already were in the process of designing and developing the T20 medium tank, and so the Ordnance Board and Armed Force decided they wanted to produce a light tank based on the T20 design. The Ordnance Board had several design goals, among those being they wanted the light tank with no more than 30 millimeters of armor. They wanted it to weigh around 24 tons, a goal they apparently didn't coordinate very well with the armored force because it ended up being a point of contention later on in the design process. And they wanted it to use the same 76 millimeter gun that was currently being slated for the T20 to use. So you end up with a tank that looks remarkably like the T20 because it was based on the T20 design. The curvature of the hull and everything is similar. The gun is the same gun, and it uses a lot of the inner mechanics from the T20 medium tank. Design and development went smoothly up until the point the Ordnance Board felt like it had developed far enough along in design that it wanted to produce 2 pilot models or prototypes. It submitted the request to the Armored Force, who at that point said, wait a second here, slow down. This is going to weigh 24 tons. We will not approve any design for a light tank which weighs more than 20 tons. They couldn't reconcile the weight issue, and so the prototypes were never approved and the project died. No T21 was ever built. The following year in 1943, still lacking a replacement tank for the M3, M5 tanks, the Army initiated the T24 project, which eventually matured into the M24 chassis. So the T21 never quite made it to prototype stage. None were ever produced. None ever saw battle. But while it didn't get to fight in the real world, thanks to Wargaming and World of Tanks, it does get to fight in-game. So let's look at how its stats compare to its sister Tier 6 Scouts. Mobility-wise, it's pretty good. It has a hefty 23.14 tons of weight, but in the crowded Tier 6 stable of Scouts, that's middle of the pack. And get used to hearing middle of the pack because a lot of its stats are middle of the pack. The T37, MT25, and VK2801 all weigh more than it, and it just barely tips the scales a little more than the Type 64. And that gives it enough weight that ramming is an option. We'll discuss that when we get to Playstyle. A specific power of 24.2, middle of the pack but generous. Terrain resistance, 0.77 on normal terrain and 0.86 on moderate terrain, again middle of the pack numbers for Tier 6 Scouts. Tied for best in class heavy or rough terrain resistance, and combine that with the just downright outstanding hull traverse of 60 degrees per second, and you end up with a tank that is very agile. It's a quick turner. It can dance with other tanks. It can knife fight. Its hull turret traverse is 43.8 seconds. So combine that with the 60 degrees of hull traverse, and you have a tank that can very quickly bring its gun to bear on an enemy no matter what direction that enemy tank is relative to the T21. Top speed, however, is a downer. It has worst in class top speed in forward at 56 kilometers per hour and in reverse at 21 kilometers per hour. Now, the lack of super fast reverse speed doesn't limit the tank anywhere near as much as its forward top speed does. And you will see when we get to Playstyle how it negatively impacts the T21 in a variety of ways. However, it's easy to adapt to all of those, and overall the T21 remains a strong performer in battle. Vision control, a highlight of any scout tank because it's one of your primary roles. Control the field of vision, provide spots to your team while at the same time you're trying to deny spots to the enemy team. It's blessed with best-in-class 390 meters of view range, and it has above-average camouflage, not best-in-class, but very adequate. Especially after you fire your weapon, it remains fairly well concealed, making sniping while you passive spot allowable in some cases where guns with brighter muzzle flashes can't pull it off. Signal range is a very adequate 777 meters. You will rarely ever find yourself in a situation where you lose contact with your allies. Top speed, again, a limiting factor in vision control. Think battles where you have to race to a contested vision control spot. You don't have the speed to pull it off, and we'll discuss that here in a little bit. Survivability, it has 600 hit points, middle of the pack, and really when you get down to it for a scout tank, whether you have 600 hit points, whether you have 610, whether you have 590 and 580, it's all pretty much the same thing. Any big tank, any huge tank is going to one-shot you. Big tanks are going to two-shot you, and so an additional 10 points of hit points or 10 points less than another tank really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. You have enough to survive a couple shots and that's it, so you always have to be aware that you don't want to put yourself into situations where you're going to be trading hit points with enemy tanks because you're going to lose out if you do. Hull armor, true to its design goals, it has 29 millimeters hull armor to the front, 25 to the side, and 22 to the rear. Turret armor just slightly better, 29 to the front and 25 to both the side and rear. And again, weight becomes the issue because with 23.14 tons, you don't have to worry about being rammed as much as if, say, you're driving an SP1C or an AMX ELC, where getting rammed is downright devastating. You can survive rams, and you have enough weight that you have the ability in emergency situations to go ahead and ram enemy tanks and get some a little additional damage and help you survive battles close in. Firepower wise, middle of the pack but above average. You run the 76mm Mike 1 Alpha 2, and it produces a fairly standard amongst Tier 6 Scouts, 115 damage for AP and APCR and 185 for HE. Penetration, again middle of the pack but kind of on the top side. 128 millimeters of penetration for AP, 177 millimeters of penetration for APCR, and 38 for HE. What you're going to want to do is carry a bit of both ammo, AP and APCR. Rate of fire, 19.55 rounds per minute. The reload is a pretty good 2.07 seconds, 3.07 seconds, something you can get below 3 seconds with skills. It carries an adequate 70 rounds of ammo. Despite its fairly fast rate of fire, in hundreds of battles I've never run out of ammo on this tank one time. The aim is 2.01 seconds, again fairly quick. Overall, you have a rapid firing single shot weapon that, although it has somewhat low alpha, over a short period of time can pump out a lot of damage. Something many tanks find out, much to their chagrin, when they ignore you in a flanking or rear position. You start piling up damage pretty rapidly. The accuracy is 0.384, which isn't stellar, it's not laser-like, but it is definitely adequate. It's good enough that you can, with some adjustments in its tendency to throw shells low, be even a good sniper. Elevation-wise, it's blessed. Top in tier. Minus 10 gun depression all the way up to plus 25 degrees of gun elevation. You can very easily, if you're paying attention to terrain, put yourself in situations to where you can fire enemy tanks that can't return fire on you. So, a lot of middle of the pack stats, but like I said, you combine all those middle of the pack stats together, and you end up with an above average scout tank. Personally, and I know people will argue with this, debate it a little bit, but personally I rank the T21 third in class for tier 6 scouts. I rank the VK2801 tops in pub battles, followed by the T37. A lot of people put the T37 first, and I put the T21 right in line behind them. A little bit of a gap behind them, but still a very good tank. T21 third in class. Some people would put the Type 64 ahead of it, but if you look at the stats head to head against the Type 64, T21 has better overall stats, and it doesn't have that open turret that is very susceptible to HE fire. Throughout its history since its inception in the game, the T21 has posted very strong win rates, better than most other tanks in class. It's a surprisingly good performer on the field of battle. Now, how do you want to equip it? Before I go any further, let's say this. I want this out very clearly stated, because a lot of people argue over tank builds, and the key decision in how you build your tank is how well do you like your build. People may argue over whether to mount this piece of equipment, or what crew skill to take here, how much ammo of each type should you take, and you'll find good players, really good players, argue over these things, and in the end it doesn't matter what they say. What matters is, this is your tank, you're playing it, what do you find most effective for you? That's what you should go with. So there's going to be various times when I discuss your tank build where I say, hey, try both of these out. Play them both 50 or 60 battles, see which ones you like most. I'm going to tell you what I find has worked for me. I highly encourage you to browse the internet, find other people discussing the T21, see what works for them, try every consideration out and see what works for you, and then go with that, because in the end that's what's important. You're the one driving the tank and you're the one having to deal with it. So come up with a configuration that works for you. Here is what works for me. Ammo wise, I run 35 AP, 35 APCR. Now, that's a little bit heavy on APCR, especially if you're in a position where you're going up multiple lines of tanks, you don't have a lot of cash on hand, you probably don't want to run that much. I recommend at least 10 APCR, because you are going to find situations and up against some of the heavily armored tier 9 tanks where you're going to need APCR to produce damage. Personally, right now, at the time I write this or film this, I have 209 million credits in my bank. I don't care if I lose money on a tank mission. So I run a little bit more APCR than most people probably would, because you'll find that in my replays, a lot of times when I do switch to APCR, I don't worry about switching back, whereas if you're cash strapped, you're going to pay a little bit more attention to your cash outflow, and you're going to switch back and forth between APCR and AP as you need and is justified by the situation. Carry at least 10 APCR. If you want to carry more than that, go for it, but you're going to want at least some. If you position yourself well, you get 90-degree flanking shots and shots right directly into the back of enemy tanks, you will be able to damage almost every tank you run up against with AP. There are going to be some situations where you want a little bit of APCR in hand. Module-wise, fairly standard progression of upgrades throughout Scouts and pretty much throughout all tanks in World of Tanks. Upgrade the suspension first, followed by the engine, because you want to get as much speed and agility as you can early on to enable the rest of your grind through the tank, to facilitate the rest of your grind through the tank. Then do turret and gun, followed by the radio. Equipment wise, you get a little bit of options here. Strongly recommend taking vents and optics no matter what else you mount. Then for the third slot, if you're going to passive spot a lot, opt for the binoculars to get the increased view range. If you're more prone to run around and be aggressive and shoot on the move, go with vertical stabilizers. Both are good choices. Neither one is a bad choice. Myself, I switch back and forth. I run 60 to 100 battles with binoculars, then I switch it out and run 60 to 100 battles with vertical stabilizers. I have multiple battles using both configurations in the T21 Hall of Fame. Both are very serviceable, and as a third choice, some of you, especially early on in the career of your T21, when you don't have a lot of crew skills that help your view range, you may want to skip both the binoculars and vertical stabilizers and run a camo net. I personally don't like using camo nets because I'd rather have something else that helps my tank in other ways, but there are scouts who like running the camo net. Try all three of them, see which one works for you. If I had to pick one overall best configuration, I would probably say go vents, optics, and binoculars. But that's a very close trade-off with vertical stabilizers on the binoculars. Consumables, very standard scout lineup. Position 4, you want large or small first aid kit so you can press 4-4, get your driver back into action if he's hurt or killed. Position 5, you want large or small repair kit so you can double pump 5 and replace and fix your tracks, get back underway. A scout, an immobile scout out in the open, is a dead scout, so you always want to be able to get back underway as fast as possible. Slot number 6, again open to debate. I personally run automatic fire extinguishers. I prefer automatics over manuals because I think in the long term they cost less money. They provide a 10% reduction to fire protection, or a 10% increase to fire protection. And if you do catch on fire after one tick of the fire dot, it automatically goes out. You don't take any additional damage. So that eliminates something that you have to pay attention to in battle. You don't constantly have to be worried if you caught on fire and try to hit your manual fire extinguisher to put out the fire before it totally destroys your tank. Other people may opt for the overall increase in performance of crew and go for a case of cola. It's another viable option. If you're from Texas, mount a case of Dr. Pepper. If you're from Texas, you understand what I just said. Crew skills. First skill, hey, it's a scout. You're going to take camouflage for everybody. There's 5 crew positions, so you don't have to worry about anybody having to double up on crew skills. Once the commander gets his camo to 100%, he's going to swap out and trade it for 6 cents, and then take camo again for a second skill. The gunner, I take designated target second because I like having the additional spotting time, both for me to snipe and for my team to snipe. Some of you may opt out for snapshot instead, your choice. The driver recommends smooth ride as second because with its outstanding agility already, taking off-road driving that high up on the list seems to be a waste of a slot. I would rather increase my accuracy on the move a little bit. Radio operator takes situational awareness second for the boost to view range, and the loader takes safe stowage for the reduction in explosions if you get ammo racked or help reduce catching on fire. Position number 3, you're going to want to end up with Brothers in Arms. However, because that's a perk and won't come into effect until it's 100% trained, go ahead and take your skills from position 4, train them all so you get the added benefit that you'll receive as they increase in training percentage, and then once you reach 100% on that crew position, trade it out for Brother in Arms and take it again in position 4. So what you're going to do, your commander is going to take recon in position 3, trade it out for Brothers in Arms, and then take it again in position 4. The gunner is going to take snapshot or designated target depending on what you took in round 2, trade it out for Brothers in Arms, and retake snapshot position 4. Driver will take off-road driving, trade it out for Brothers in Arms, and then retake it in position 4, and both your radio operator and loader should take repairs, trade them out for Brothers in Arms once training is complete, and then start repairs again in slot 4. And that rounds out your tank build. Unless you're a very dedicated driver and love scouts, keep it in your garage and go on. There's very few skills left that provide great impact. The driver with clutch braking, not really needed, but still nice. And the commander still has several good skills, but at that point you're going to be so comfortable with your tank you'll be able to figure out what few skills are left and what order you should take. Moving on to playstyle. The tank is very much a standard type scout. Beginning in most battles, you're going to want to go for passive spots, maybe half court spotting on maps like Prokhorovka if you can't get to E1, and several other maps, Fisherman's Bay and things like that. Sand River assault mode, you may want to do an active scouting run first, especially on offense. However, you'll find that pure active scouting is kind of a no-no because of the top speed. You don't have enough speed to survive long if you try to pure active scout. Half court spotting, yes. Pure active spotting, probably not a good idea. Next caveat with passive spotting. If you're in a situation like Prokhorovka where you race to the E1 bush, you're going to a contested vision control spot, or you're going to a contested zone of control spot like say the Donut or Hill in Karelia, the mines, the central mine and mines. Remember, you're slow for a scout. During that 30-second countdown, as you're perusing the orders of battle, if you're on a map with a contested spot that you're going to be trying to racing to, and you see that there's fast mediums on the enemy team, for example Cromwell's, or there's fast scouts over there, you probably don't even want to try to enter the race because you're going to be tail end Charlie. And if you ever talk to a fighter pilot, being tail end Charlie in a dogfight is not good. Other tanks, enemy tanks, are going to get to their positions before you. They're going to be set up and ready to fire and looking for an easy target. And guess what? Here you come plodding along in the rear, in the open. You are that easy target they're looking for. So guess who gets shot at? You. When you're in a map, in an order of battle, where there's going to be a foot race at the beginning of the fight, it's probably wise not to enter the race. Opt out. Instead of going for E1 and Prokhorovka, just do half-court spotting instead. It's going to serve you better in the long run. Instead of racing for the mines, especially if you don't have a lot of support with you in mines, go somewhere else, do something else. Instead of engaging in a foot race you know you're going to lose, look for an alternative way to help your team. In Karelia, instead of going to the Donut, go and spot on the north side where speed isn't as much of a factor. Or passive spot in the bushes kind of in the middle of the map to where you can still provide benefit to your team, but you're not putting yourself in a position where you know you're going to lose hit points right away and potentially die in the first 2 minutes of the fight. That doesn't help anybody on your team. Ramming wise, you are big enough that you can ram. In emergency situations, don't be afraid to ram into a tank to get that little extra bit of damage you need to take them out before you die. Against smaller scouts, scouts with thin armor, and smaller artillery, some of the smaller TDs, like I'm thinking T67, ram away. It's a great way to get extra damage and complete a kill fast enough to have time to escape before other enemy come in to help the guy out. But at the same time, remember, even though you're fairly big for a scout, you are not by any means big overall. If you think because you're a big scout you can go up and ram a T95 or run right into the side of a 212 artillery or a myriad of other larger tanks with heavy armor, you're going to find out that it's not a wise decision. So while you can ram, and while you don't have to worry quite as much as many other scouts about getting rammed, you still are not a kamikaze king like a 2801 or some of the other hefty scouts. Ram with discretion. Don't take on the big boys because you'll find out that you're not really big overall. Something else to keep in consideration with top speed. When you're in a late game situation and you have maybe one or two allies, maybe no allies at all, and you're facing multiple enemy tanks, and also during the middle of the battle and end of the battle when you're doing drive-bys, flanking movements, always remember that you don't have as much escape speed as what you're used to having in faster scouts. You're going to need greater margins of error to perform maneuvers such as that, also to do delayed rushes. You need to have cover and concealment closer to you in order to reach them safely and before the enemy can return fire. You have to keep this in mind as you play, because if you play it like a normal scout that can go 64 up to 70, you're going to find yourself caught out in the open without the speed you need to get away. Keep that in mind. In the endgame situations, you're somewhat limited because a lot of times there'll be enemy tanks that are just as fast as you or close enough to your speed that you have a very difficult time escaping or moving to far enough away in the battlefield to where you can conceal and completely relocate and conduct true guerrilla warfare. It doesn't mean that you're incapable of pulling off a late game comeback. It just means that you're going to have to be very aware of enemy positions on the battlefield in order to do it. And you'll find that much like the SP1C, if the enemy is coordinated at all in the end of the battle, it's going to be extremely challenging to pull off a comeback because you simply can't get far enough away from them to move to a location to where you can attack, and it can attack with a complete element of surprise. So, while you're a great performer overall, you're above average in Tier 6, there are a couple situations where you're extremely challenged in your gameplay, and you have to always be aware of that and try to avoid those situations in battle. Successfully do that, and you're going to find that this tank is a joy to drive, and you can produce consistently good results with it. Battles with 2k damage can become commonplace if you play within the tank's limitations. With that said, let's go ahead, press battle, and take it out into the field of play and watch it perform in a public battle. And we end up in Sand River Assault Defense in a Tier 7 battle. Perfect for a Tier 6 light. Doesn't get much better than this, although I must say, and I don't know if this is aberration or not, but lately I've been getting a fairly good amount of Tier 6 battles where a Tier 6 is the highest tank in my T21, something I hardly ever get in my VK2801. With that, maybe every 5,000 or 6,000 battles I get one. With the T21, I seem to get about every 200 or 300 battles. So let me pause this here for a second. Discuss the order of battle. We have 3 lights on the enemy team with 1 artillery. Our team has 2 lights and 2 artilleries. Enemy team has a good mix of other tanks. They have 3 TDs, 5 mediums, Looks like 3 heavies, whereas we're kind of dominated by heavies. We only have 1 TD and 4 mediums, the rest are heavies. So we have a big force with good armor and weapons. We should be set up pretty well. The enemy team doesn't have quite as heavy of a force, and some of their big guns are artillery, or excuse me, are TDs, so they aren't really well suited to attack. If I can get up to the middle here and use my spotting skills and get some people to snipe what I'm seeing, we should be able to win this battle pretty easily. It's going to come down to, does the enemy team try to counter me, and can they force me out of the middle, and are we going to defend our flanks well? So I am headed over to that area. Fortunately, I had a perfect starting location, so my lack of speed doesn't really hurt me here because I can get out here pretty fast. It looks like our AMX ELC is coming with me. As I pull up over the top here, I should start getting spots right away. Again, view range is good on this tank. Now the PZ-38NA is in a position where he's going to light me up here in a second, so I'll just back out. That heavy had his gun trained on me already. It wouldn't take him long to aim in on me. I didn't want to sit up there and try to trade another shot and take damage, which really is a horrible time to take damage this early in the fight. But the PZ-38 has moved on to the east, so I can pull back up here. Now their AMX CLC is in a countering position that's really, if he stays there, it's going to be good for their team because he prevents me from getting continuous spots up here at the same time he's spotting our team. So we need to get him out of there. It looks like the Kiri is moving up to where he'll be able to shoot at him, so he's going to have to move here in a second. Kiri's being very aggressive. And he has the AMX on the run now. The Roach knows he's going to die if he stays there, so he's moving out. I'm going to come up and try to hit him on the way as he egresses. And the Roach dies now. I have control of the middle of the field of battle. And you can see I'm only 390 away from that TD. Even though I'm firing at him, he can't see me. The Jackson's close enough now, it can. I hit him right on the mantlet, so I don't do any damage. But I'll pull back up here and take out the Su-85. 403 meters, not a problem. J Panther's moving forward, so I need to help take him out. Don't want him to get too close to me. And you see twice in a row, it threw a shell low. It likes to throw sinker balls. Something you compensate for just by shooting a little high of where you want to hit, because overall it'll tend to throw more shells low than high. Especially if you don't aim in all the way. But overall, it's a fairly accurate gun. Now, right now in the whole situation over the battle, on the west side we have the AMX ELC moving into the enemy's backfield with decent support. Over to the east we have a good lineup of heavies in fairly good position. And I have uncontested vision control in the middle of the map. We have a 2-tank lead. We're really primed well to go on and win this battle. Unless we do something really stupid, this should be an easy win for us. Because basically we're in control of the entire battlefield right now. The other team is on offense, but we're the ones that are controlling the flow of the fight, and that usually ends well for the offensive team. I mean, it usually ends poorly for the offensive team. We're controlling what they do, which means they aren't going to win. Shoot to the flank of the IS here. Goodbye, IS. Now we have a 4-tank lead. I think all they have left in the west is that Kiri and the 150.
That one didn't go through. Penetration.
I get to keep sniping the T-34-85 and take him out.
Enemy armor is destroyed.
We're maintaining our 4-tank lead, and they're rapidly running out of tanks to provide an effective offense. So at this point, we're moving into mop-up stage. And I'm going to start moving up the middle to see if I can help with those scouts to the west. I'm watching east right now to see if I get opportunity fire, but I really want to come up here and see if I can help flank the 150 and get him out of there. So I'm in a position where I can shoot into his rear. And you'll notice, and you may say, hey, how come you're using APCR? A lot of times with this tank, once I switch to APCR, I don't switch back. Because quite frankly, I have over 200 million credits in my account, and I don't really care if I waste a little ammo. It doesn't really mean that much to me. For most people, yes, you're going to want to pay more attention and switch back to AP when you have those prime shooting spots, because you don't need to waste credits. For me, it doesn't really concern me because I have so much credits it doesn't matter. So don't do as I do as I say. Most of you probably aren't in the same financial situation as me in game, and credits mean a lot to you, so you do want to switch back to AP when you have good flanking shots and you don't need the extra penetration to score damage.
Critical hit. Enemy armor is damaged.
Ooh, nice shot, OI. Just the T20 left. I think he was last seen here, so I'm assuming he's still going to be in that general location. I'll pull forward and see if I can see him. I should be able to shoot into the back of him if I do. There he is. Oh, a couple hits at once. If I get the next shot, I get the kill. There we go. So there's a look at the T21 in battle. I end up with 1,908 XP. It's an ace tanker mission. I got 1,845 damage and 3 kills. 1,726 points of assisted damage in 10 spots, and got a scout medal. Accuracy wise, I was actually a little low. I was 23 of 35, which is 66%. And normally you don't have any trouble getting over 70%, even up over 90% on some battles. You just have to, if you notice, when I was in the middle, I was taking a lot of fast shots at that T150 and just barely missing him. But if you aim in all the way, easy 75% accuracy, fully aimed. The tank in this battle got to spot, it got to snipe. It kind of did a delayed rush and was able to help with the 150. And there wasn't any opposition, so you don't really see how speed can be a limiting factor. However, that's the ideal way to employ the tank. You don't go into the hotly contested area and try to sneak through. You wait until you know you have open space to exploit, then you move to the rear of the enemy. I was able to help with the 150, go up on top the hill, help with the Cromwell, and help end the fight by taking out the T20. That's the perfect way to employ a delayed rush with this tank. You're going into a situation where you know there's nobody there waiting for you that's going to put you into a race to survive, because you're not going to win a race to survive. Now, some battles you're going to have to be more aggressive than that in order to help your team win, but when you're in a situation where you don't have to, don't push it. Play within your tank's capability, and it's very easy to end up with a bunch of good missions in this tank. Now, over the next week or two, depending on how much I play the tank and what kind of examples I get, I'll try to post some YouTubes showing it against a tier 9 battle, tier 8 battle. Use maybe a purely passive, where in this example of sitting up on top of the dunes there, you're doing what I call open passive. You're not using foliage to conceal your tank. You're just relying on superior view range. So I'll try to get you an example of the tank performing on a scout map where you get to use bushes to hide, and then some other scout rules as well during the battle. So from Sand River Assault Defense, showing off the capabilities of a T21, a good, solid, well-performing Tier 6 scout. Happy hunting.